activation capacity to get these things done, um, there's a finite amount, and yet there's more change. So change has gone up 70% over the last 10 years, and
Mm.
the the interest and the support, we talk about how uncomfortable it was for people to go home, that's
Hmm.
gone down in direct inverse proportion.
You may be feeling it. Today, we're facing a reality where the volume of change is skyrocketing, where our collective capacity to handle it is, in fact, shrinking. Brian joins me to discuss how leaders can bridge this activation gap by moving beyond simple announcements to true sense making. It is about intentionality and realizing that if you do not spend the time on the front end, you will most definitely spend it cleaning up on the back end.
This is Leadership Sound Bites. Real leaders, real moments, real growth.
So welcome to this week's episode of Leadership Sound Bites. One of my super special guests. I think this may have been the third time we've been in the room together, maybe?
It is.
We were in a lot of other rooms before we were in the virtual room. Brian Storts. Brian is currently the Director of Change Management of Unlock Health. Unlock Health, you don't know the value that you just got, okay? I mean, tremendous. Brian, you're the reason that I got exposed to ProSci, and I'm a zealot with change management. And I know the acronym ADCAR that we use through it. Literally, I've done that with a napkin for people to create awareness. And leaders go, oh my gosh, I see what we missed as they're rewriting and writing stuff down. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And I know you have a quote to start us off with, and I'm excited for this conversation. So all you, sir.
Oh, thank you for having me. And for anybody else who's on the other side of this, Michelle is a fantastic coach and coach in leadership, a coach in lean thinking and getting results and getting people to move along for the ride.
Thank
And so a lot of what we've done, oh, thank you, Michelle. Thanks for having me again. And so when you talked about ADCAR, ProSci has always been a wonderful partner. And yes, ADCAR is just a great way of thinking about the human journey on what people need to do to get through that change, to navigate that change. And it is about putting people in the center and getting from A to B. And A can no longer get us there. B is where we have to get there. But we've often heard quotes from Einstein, and one of my favorite ones is, we cannot solve our problems with the same thinking we used when we created them. And so and he also talks about doing the same things over and over and trying to get a different
Definition of
result.
insanity, right?
So what do we need to do in 2026 to do things differently, in a place where speed is no longer the buzzword? It's just the reality. There is speed, there's complexity, but now what do we do with it today
Hmm.
and tomorrow, through this year and beyond?
You and I, before we hit record, were chatting just about change fatigue, bandwidth for change, all that stuff. I see it a lot. I've seen it escalated more from, and share your perspective, but when COVID hit, there was radical change that people had to go through. And I remember navigating with the team and the people at Sutter, I mean, in a mixed emotions, right? Because we're all individuals. And so for me, when I had to work, when I air quote had to work from home, I was okay with that. Because I'm not someone that needs all people around all the time, even though, but that's not the majority of the population. So what happens is, even navigating change to where people are working from home, maybe people are sharing a dining room table with their kids and their spouse and all the stuff working. You're seeing a reverse shift of that now, right? So people settled in, they got the routine going with remote work, and now organizations are having people come back to work. And they're now fighting with the same ferocity that they fought to when they had to go home to work. It's like, no, we don't want to come back. And I'm like, but you fought because you didn't want to leave.
Mhm.
So it is just we're coming back to the whole thing of change and routine, of what it is. And there is a fatigue and a bandwidth. What are you seeing, and what are you thinking that we need to do differently about it?
Well, that's a great one. And yes, I love the word ferocity, because when they sent me home, I was thinking, oh my gosh, what am Where
Yeah.
am I going to sit? And what do I do?
Yes.
And now it's like, oh my gosh, I have to dress up and find my dress shoes, or at least some shoes that aren't flip-flops, to go back into the office.
Yes. Yes.
And and that commute and the this and the that. And so, so it's discomfort.
Hmm.
And so that's just what you mentioned is just one of the things that is touching us now. And there's so much happening where we obviously, and this is not today's topic at all, at least I hope not bringing me there, because we could talk for 6 hours about AI. But that, and so digital and technology and economics and other factors, the economy, the way of doing things, generational shifts, modernization, uh, transformation of markets themselves,
Hmm.
the pressure points. And I work in healthcare, and I'm very fortunate to be working with Unlock, and before that with Sutter Health,
Hmm.
where we focus on the communities and the patients. And my gosh, how much are we being touched? Because we're patients too, and we are community too. How much are we being touched by that? And so activation capacity to get these things done, um, there's a finite amount, and yet there's more change. So change has gone up 70% over the last 10 years, and the yet the interest and the support, we talk about how uncomfortable it was for people to go home, that's
Hmm.
gone down in direct inverse proportion. And what that creates, and there have been some people who've done the research on this, so I'm just quoting that from them.
Yeah.
Just to use my hands, oops, let me do it that way. That creates an activation gap because the the support is going down, but the change is going up. And now we have to deal with that. And what do we do to work with finite capacity to bring people along with that reduced
How
support?
do we, because part of it too, Brian, because I do so much coaching with humans, it's that shift in not looking at things. Because I have people, and you're exposed to other humans too, that will use language when there's so much change going around that it's like everything's changing. And I'm like, I'm so attuned to those kind of absolute words that because
Mhm.
it signals the subconscious that is primary job is to keep us safe, right? And the secondary one is to use the least amount of energy, which by the way, change does not use the least amount of energy. But it's one of those things to for people to help ground people in the fact that what's not changing. Because in the whole world of change, you all the stuff that you just cited, there's a lot changing in that world, but it's for us humans to go, okay, so what's not changing? For like you changed roles but you didn't have to move, or I'm still with my wife, or I can still go to dinner on Tuesday nights when I want to. Again, I'm making stuff up, but it's like, do I still have my dog with me? Do I mean, and it's so important for us to be able to decompress by grounding and realizing, okay, there's a lot changing, but not everything is changing, so that we at least have a little bit more bandwidth to navigate the change. So we don't go into fight, flight, freeze, or fawn mode, right? Of panic. What are you seeing? What are your thoughts?
And I love that you use the word grounded. And I just went back to the movie. We're not quite in that movie, Everything Everywhere All at Once.
Yes.
We're not,
Yes.
that's not our full reality. Maybe for some of us, it feels that way. We feel like we're in that same motion that that movie was. But what a great point where what keeps us grounded, because not everything in our daily routine, not everything we know, not everyone we know, and in our work environments as well. So this applies to our non-work environments. Changes there, and it's not separate. It's all part of the big package,
Yes.
personal and business. But in the work environment, if we are still with the same company, there are things we know, there, the way things are done, why are we here? Why do we care? What what do we do for our clients or customers or community? So those things keep us grounded. But then what matters? So again, why do we care helps us to understand what's the why? Why should I care? Why should I care?
Mm-hmm.
What's the compelling thing in front of us? And we can take that in context. So it's just
Yeah.
brought into context. And so one of the things when I think about activation challenges and finite capacity for people, and people change as individuals, as one of our favorite partners talks about. Individuals change, not organizations.
Exactly.
Organizations are a collection of individuals. So, what do we do to strengthen our activation capacity? And some of the things that come to mind are strategic coherence. And so these are some things I've been focusing on lately. Strategic
Yeah.
coherence, that leaders can clearly articulate what matters now, what does not. And you talked about what's not changing, so that's perfect
Yeah.
there. What is stopped, the trade-offs being explicit and not assumed. So that strategic coherence is really important. I've been, I probably, I didn't check if it's in the dictionary, but I've been using this term leadership sense making. And so it's not a
What is
sense,
it? What is it?
sense,
Leadership
sense
sense
making.
making?
Yes.
Okay.
So,
SENSE.
yes,
Okay.
SENSE. And sure, you could kind of bring in the sensei, but it's more leaders consistently interpreting change for their teams,
Yeah.
translating strategy into day-to-day decisions and not just announcements.
Yeah.
Well, the role of leaders, but this is not exclusive to leaders. It's also for anybody to help each other along the way. Role clarity is a big deal also. So that's a third thing we look at, understanding how the change is affecting their roles and not just the organization in general. So honing in on that. And
Hmm.
we know that when we are leading change, we have to articulate that for people. But as people, we also need to be able to focus on how the change is affecting me and what does that mean for me and what do I do with it. And then when right before we recorded, I was talking about one of my favorite things where all how many times, and hopefully if anybody's listening, they'll be like, yeah, yeah, yeah. How many times have people said when you started to do the change, if only you would have asked us, we would have told you to look at this or to not do that. And so what do we do to involve the people who need to have their voices and their insights and their ideas in the co-creation to shape the how and the when? So we have a problem that we have to deal with. We have an opportunity that we have to seize. But how we go about it, the collection of the people who are closest to it can best inform how it's done. And
Hmm.
I'll stop here in just a moment. I'll just kind of clear the other three
No,
things.
you're fine. I love the acronym.
And so also capability and enablement, the training, the tools to allow the, how do I get from being sent home to being sent back to the office? So
Yeah.
enablement to get there and without what we can call heroic workarounds. So
Yeah.
what are we doing to work around in heroism? I'm doing this instead of that, or I'm working longer, or I'm trying this, but what can we do to create the right capability and enablement? And then the reinforcement and feedback to make it stick.
Hmm.
And then most importantly, they're all important, but also one of the other overused terms, but no less important, is psychological safety and
Mm.
trust, where people feel safe to bring it forward and to get there to
Hmm.
the finish line. So
Yeah.
those are some of the things that I've been pondering about. How do we strengthen that activation
Yeah.
capacity to close that gap today?
It's interesting when you're talking because my brain went to a number of different places, right? And I think a lot of times what happens, and these are well-intentioned leaders, Brian, that I come across, that they may do the strategizing like you talk about, right? They come together, they talk about the change, they land and identify and align on what that change is, what needs to happen in the organization. And I have this visual in my head that they're sitting at a table with the other leaders, virtual or otherwise, and then they turn around months down the road to communicate to the rest of the organization, and all the context setting doesn't come with them or the communication. And I think that's the biggest miss that I think us as humans make, is that it's almost like we drop the rest of the organization in at the end of it, or we didn't bring them along in the conversation, the context setting. And so that's my encouragement too with leaders. When you go to communicate with the rest of the organization as it gets cascaded down throughout the organization, give them the context setting that you yourself had the advantage of being a part of, to where you landed on this decision. because a lot of times we just don't do this. I don't think it's an intentional miss. It's an unintentional miss. They weren't intentional about including it. And so conversations that I have with leaders, I'll ask the question, well, how does the rest of the org know that?
Mhm.
And they're like, oh, I remember a conversation I had with Trina White, and this was early on when they were going through some org restructuring with the foundation on the East Bay. And we were in the change management class that Sutter had. I can't remember. Is it ACE? I think it was
ACE,
ACE.
Accelerated Change Excellence.
Yeah. So she and I were partnered up in that course. And I remember when we were talking about the communication, all the stuff that was going to happen, because these are real issues that are going on. She said, okay, we're going to do this, this, and this. And I said, great. And I said, so you've navigated your own change journey over these months of figuring out what it is. She goes, yeah. I said, so how are you going to get the rest of the organization where you're at today? And she sat back, and she's an awesome leader. But this is the kind of stuff I talk about and think about, is that we unintentionally leave out the part of it because we haven't acknowledged the journey that we've been on the entire time as leaders, strategizing, doing all this stuff.
Mhm.
So I think that's just my encouragement is to remind leaders, bring the rest of the team along. How are you going to do that? What's the journey that you went through to get to where you're at today?
Mhm. As you were talking a couple minutes ago, I was thinking about something that an old story that people in the stage community often talk about, where the person has one line in the play. It's "Hark, I hear the cannon roar." All he has to do is get up, stage right, walk up there, say "Hark, I hear the cannon roar," and exit stage left. But when he gets up there, he hears the boom from the cannon, and he jumps up and says something that is not "Hark, I hear the cannon roar," and walks off the other way. And so when we get to that moment, how do we remember what matters?
Mm-hmm.
Remember that storytelling and that sense making and that context setting. And another thing we say at Unlock is let's get real. So
Mm-hmm.
keeping it real as well in that moment and engaging with the people, and what do they need to know and why should they care?
Mm. And real, when you said that, to be real, you need to be present. And so it's like, get out of here and
Mhm.
get here, because if you're here, you're not gonna get the gauge of how the message is landing with people. You're not going to see it, you're not going to feel it. And so part of it is speak from here, speak from the heart, right?
Mhm.
Connect with people that way, and because that's how we connect with other humans. And it's okay to be vulnerable. And I don't mean like Brene Brown talk. She's like, you don't puke everything onto people of what you're scared and all this stuff, because leaders have the role of, giving people hope too. But be real about, this is going to be challenging. This is a
Mhm.
new direction for the organization. I recognize this isn't easy for you. When we talk about, like, there's a lot of, like we talked early on, a lot of organizations that are returning to office, to on-site work. This is a big deal. It wouldn't have been a big deal if it was 2 months after they went home. But this is 5 years later, right? 6 years later, if you're doing it just this year.
Mhm.
And so when you were talking about the 70% increase of change over the last 10 years, I had a question in my head: how much of that happened in the last 5 or 6? Because I
Mhm.
have a feeling a bulk of it, like if you looked at that chart over that 10-year mark, it probably was cruising along here and then it went like this.
Yes, it's been accelerating for sure.
Yeah,
How much, what it is, how it is, and so on. That very much has been. Could I go back to something you said a moment ago, though?
please.
I was thinking about a sponsor who really modeled what you were saying when you were reflecting on let's get real and keeping it
Yeah.
real, and connecting and speaking from the heart. One of the best sponsors that I've had in recent memory was our president of shared services, who
Mm.
we were going through the pandemic in healthcare, and we were implementing this big ERP. And he would get in front of our program team, and often he would say, "Guys, I know this is tough. This is really tough out there, and we're continuing to face some challenges." So one of the things we really loved about that was that he was getting that right up front with us. He wasn't sugarcoating it. He
Mm-hmm.
was acknowledging what everyone was thinking and feeling already. And then he could focus on being inspirational and also strategic and tactical to get through it together. But
Mm-hmm.
just one of the qualities he really brought out that we look for in our executives and sponsors when there is something big happening.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think the call out that you made too, Brian, because is the fact that there was a blend, right? It wasn't 100% on the, I know this is really hard and difficult and everything else, but there was a transition. So you were acknowledging, then there was, hey, here's the path forward. I know you can do this. Keep checking in. There's a feedback loop there, right? Of how are
Mhm.
things going? I'm going to check in with you. Because sometimes leaders can get in this, if I'm going to acknowledge space, that we just stay there. I know this is really tough, and it's like, okay, and like where's the rest of it? Or we skip over that acknowledge piece and we go right to the inspirational stuff. And when we do that too soon without acknowledging, people don't feel heard. And what I heard from you is you felt heard. You were in the audience of that message. And it was like, okay, you get us. And we're going to continue to trust and we're going to go along because you get us. You've got your finger on the pulse of what's going on.
Mhm. And as a leader, we do need to prepare as much as we can. We
Mm-hmm.
do need to anticipate the questions. We do need to anticipate what we believe is on people's minds and in their and what they're feeling and be best prepared. But then when as the recipients, we are looking also for someone to be able to have the courage to say, what's on your minds today?
Mm,
How are you feeling about this? What do we need to know? And that dialogue then is informative, it's engaging, it's constructive and productive, and it helps people to move along. When the voices aren't invited to be heard, is usually when they stop trying to open their mouth and say something.
hmm Well, at least not in a positive light.
Yes.
Yeah, it was so funny you brought me back to, I was at Centene for a while, which is the health plan side after I left Sutter Health, and a lead change manager there. And so I was dealing with that. And I remember we had workshops with the leaders to equip the leaders and around awareness around change and all that. And one leader said, well, here's what I do. She said, if I have really difficult, challenging people that are going to oppose stuff, I meet with them offline and but they don't have them in the bigger room when she's communicating the rest of the group. And I said, okay. And I said, what's the downside of that? Because in her mind, there was no downside. And she couldn't think of it. And I said, well, let me give you one. I said, the people that are the loudest, my experience has been they're actually representing a broader percentage of your team than you realize because you have other people that feel similarly, but don't have the courage to speak up. So we do want them in the broader room so that how you're addressing what that narrative is and what those complaints are, the concerns are, the rest of the people are hearing it who aren't verbalizing it, but feel the same way. And I don't know what your experience is around that.
Same. And I also think about how the dissenters or the people who are reluctant, not only do we have to bring them along, but if we can focus on acknowledging and working with them to bring them along, they then become the loudest voices of advocacy.
Mhm.
Not
Yeah.
everybody crosses that line. Not everybody crosses over,
No.
but many will if if we do acknowledge, like you said, they are representing a large swath or a large majority at times, and they're saying what others are thinking. And the other thing I think about, even though I've never been and never will be in the political arena,
hmm
also when we talk about what are the hallway conversations that happen before people get um, convened. And so when do we need to have the conversation? So there is a positive, there is a sliver of positive, but just a different way of looking at it
hmm
than what that other person was thinking when you were talking with
Yeah.
them. But it is, where do we need to go to the hot spots and have, when appropriate, a one-on-one or a one-on-6 or a one-on-10 versus throwing 100 people in the room and trying to deal with it all there. So it does take a little more time and energy sometimes, but if it's a true hotspot, where's that white glove approach truly needed?
Mhm. I totally agree. And the Japanese term is nemawashi, and we would use this in lean management system too. It's the meeting before the meeting,
Mhm.
right? So to your point, where do you know that there's going to be concerns that in the larger group is not going to be the best place for someone to hear about the first time or to air that stuff the first time? And so you're absolutely right. Be very strategic. And who are the people that I need to meet with ahead of time before we all come together?
Mhm.
And you're absolutely right, because those meetings are critical so that when the whole group comes together, this isn't the first time everyone's hearing about it. You're going to have people that are larger stakeholders or louder voices, whatever that may be, that are influencing the others. Have those meetings, but don't exclude them from the broader one. But yeah,
And
totally
then
agree.
And then when we get to the larger meeting, we also should do more than just say, okay, we're going to get everybody together. And we're going to go through A, B, C, D, and E, and we have this really tight agenda. But rather, what are the objectives with that group in that moment? What is the best use of everybody's time in there? And how do we create the right engagement to fulfill those objectives?
Mhm.
So those are golden opportunities if we look at them the right way and acknowledge the room before and during and after the
Mhm.
time everybody's convened.
It's so funny because what you said is we come together with this tight agenda, which means the opposite of what you just described, right? Is that we don't give breathing room to things that need breathing room. It's like if you can go based on what are our desired outcomes, then you've got the flexibility within that to say, you know what, let's create the space for these conversations, for this alignment to happen, for this stuff to get surfaced. It's scary for leaders to go, what is your biggest fear? What is your biggest fear with what's going on? I mean, and capture it on a flip chart, whiteboard, whatever you want to do, because you want to surface that fear.
Mhm.
And then you also want to surface what are you most excited about? Because you got people in the room that are not fearful of anything. Okay. But you need to be able to create the space for them to be able to surface that stuff and be able to navigate through. I totally agree with you. Versus this really tight agenda, which just could have been a PowerPoint slide for people to read if you're not going to have the opportunity for them to weigh in on what's going on. Yeah.
Yeah, are we talking with them or at them?
Yeah.
Mhm.
So I want to go back to one thing. I'm very aware of your time and I appreciate it. But one of the things that you talked about in the beginning was that inversion thing, right? That the demand is gone up by 70%, the resources have gone down by 40. So I'm going to take one thing off the plate is throwing
Mhm.
money at it, right? Um, what can we do, Brian?
What can we do? I mentioned a few things that have been on my mind, and these are some things I've been talking about a little bit out in the world lately.
Yeah.
And you and I both talked about this, the strategic coherence, the sense making, the clarity, and so on. But also when we went back at the beginning of this call about what's the human journey that needs to
Hmm.
take place, and a way of thinking about how to lead and successfully bring people along in that journey. There's a way of thinking with five elements to it that move along the way, and it's also not in any way at odds with the thinking of ADKAR,
Hmm.
more around what are the things that we're doing along the way at these different steps. And the first thing is sometimes the best way to do it isn't even understood yet. So
Mm.
we're going and getting everything going and setting up the project plan and mobilizing the team and setting up our metrics, but we may not have even clearly focused on what is the it? What's the
Hmm.
true north? What does what's the best way and what does the outcome look like? What is the best success? And so the first thing we sometimes need to do is make sure that at the sponsorship level that
Hmm.
we have strategized.
Hmm.
And by strategizing, it might include a design session to get them in the room at the top level to get that intent and objectives clarified. The next thing we need to do is get the sponsors and the leaders who are going to have to bring the larger group of people along for the ride, get them aligned. And so the next thing we need to do is harmonize. And part of harmonizing is getting the storytelling set up. Get that narrative on everybody on the same page. Then we need to do something that we often don't do. And I brought it up early in this conversation together, which is when people say, if only you would have asked us. Well, let's ask them. Let's mobilize those influencers. Sometimes we call them change agents, champions, ambassadors, all kinds of different things, influencers. But who are those
Unofficial
people?
leaders. Yeah.
Yeah. Who are those people? The influencers that will fan out and represent everybody's voices. Also, the process owners who have a little bit of say in the matter and some thoughts, and get them to co-create what it is. And so that's involve, which is the third one. So we strategize, we harmonize, we involve, and then we put the rubber to the road and we focus on bringing to life what was co-created by these people, that was informed by the narrative with a unified leadership, which was clearly strategized as to what are we trying to accomplish. And when we focus, we bring it across the finish line, and then we make sure that it doesn't go away. And we get all these strategic or not strategic, these heroic workarounds where not everybody has poor intent. They just work around because it hasn't
Didn't
stuck.
work as intended. Yeah.
But we need to track it and keep the momentum and keep growing from it. And so a simple way of thinking is strategize, harmonize, involve, focus, and track as shift from yesterday to tomorrow.
Yeah. I love it. I love it. I freaking appreciate the time in the room with you. I have missed being in the room with you, sir. So thank you for taking the time.
It's my privilege, Michelle.
Yeah, and I'm excited for this next journey of yours, and what's going on, and continue to learn. There's an open invite for you to come back anytime and chat and share what you're learning, because it's it's not change, and the ability to manage change and navigate through it and lead through it is not common knowledge. Um, People, they have the best intentions, and what they'll tend to focus on is where we're communicating with people. And we're communicating the why. Like, okay, but there's so much more to change. And so whatever you're experiencing, or insights that you can give for people, I think it's beneficial. This is definitely a subject. I like shift. I really do. And I agree with you. It complements ADKAR really well. Because part of it, when you were talking, it's almost like the how behind some of this stuff. So I appreciate that as well, sir. ADKAR being, if you don't know, is awareness, desire, knowledge, ability, and reinforcement. And part of the reinforcement, I use tracking and metrics and measurement with people. You don't need to beat people over the head with a stick. But, and rather, I appreciate the time and just your expertise in this area. And I still remember, I think the last time I had you on, the time before it was the first time. And I still have it in my head, the speed of now. You said that, and it was just like, it is now. It's not about waiting, it's about now. And so I encourage people that change management and navigating change, it is now. We don't have the luxury of waiting, because we're not waiting on the other stuff that we're having people navigate through. So the managing the change is part of it as well. So how do we support people better in this, that what we're doing? Yeah, because there's a lot happening. So thank you, thank you, thank you. Any last thoughts you have, sir?
Whenever I'm asked that, then I draw a complete blank. But I guess the last thought I'll add is a new one to this conversation, which is sometimes we have to slow down to speed up. And that they talk about that in sports, where the game is too fast for people, so they have to slow it down so that they can speed up. And part of slowing down so we can speed up and change is to ponder the things we have to ponder, ask the things we have to ask, and then we can speed up with where do we go next.
Yeah. The thing I'll add to that, which is so funny, is, and I remember talking to people about this, you're going to spend the time somewhere. It's either going to be on the front end of it, where you're doing what you're talking about, slowing down to speed up, or you're going to spend it on the back end trying to gather everything up that kind of just blew away, as you didn't spend the time on the front end. So be very intentional about where you spend that time, because you will spend it.
Yeah, I love that, Michelle.
Yeah, thank you. Have a great one. This has been Leadership Soundbites with Brian and Michelle. And until next time, I appreciate the likes, the subscribes, and the shares. And share this message with people that need to hear it. I know I did. So have a great one. Thank you.
Thanks, Michelle.